So a warm welcome to all of our Foundation Trust public and staff members. Probably joined this call for the first time. We really appreciate your interest in the work of the Trust, and particularly giving up your time today to sit in on the meeting and also to have the chance to ask some questions later on. The meeting papers for the meeting are on the CCAM website under the About Us section in the Council of Governors web page. So this is the first time we've had such a large meeting in public in this way, and I'd be really grateful for everyone's support to help the meeting remain on track and focused on the key purpose, which is to allow the council members to hold me and the non-executive directors to account for the performance of the board and to allow them to represent the interests of their members. There's a section at the end of the meeting for our members to ask any questions. So if you're a member of staff or the public, please can you save your questions for then. Throughout the meeting, we'll ask you to remember that while this is a meeting held in public, it's not a public meeting. So speaking parts go to the people around the virtual board table. So we ask that all members, staff and public turn their video off to reduce internet issues and stay on mute and refrain from using the chat function until the section for public questions at the end. We're really grateful there's a lot of interest in the meeting, and as a result we will have to be the secretariat will may have to resort to muting some people if you don't strictly adhere to the rules, basically, in terms of if there's background noise, the meeting is getting disrupted, but I'm sure we'll all be impeccably behaved and that won't be an issue. I'm sorry that sounds heavy-handed, but we want to make sure the meeting runs smoothly and the governors have to have the freedom to question the appropriate people in order to do their job on behalf of the members. So if we follow the rules, the meeting will be, I'm sure, a great success. We've scheduled a break halfway through to make sure we keep our circulation moving. The health notice, please keep moving. It's not good to be sitting down all the time. Have some refreshment, take on plenty of liquid, and we'll get the meeting through on time. And in terms of meeting etiquette for the governors, as there are a lot of people on the call, can ask the governors to get my attention in the following way. Use the Teams ability to raise your virtual hand. Some colleagues may be on an iPad and that's not possible. So if that's not possible, you can use the chat function. And if you want to speak, just put an X or something in the chat box to alert me. And Isabel or Katie will make sure they remind me if I miss you. And if all else fails, just speak up. Okay, sorry for the lengthy announcements, but that's at least sets the scene for the meeting. Now, Isabel, apologies for absence, please.
Yep, we've only got two apologies. Vanessa Wood from Age UK Thanet, an unexpected electrical failure at her work premises this morning. So she's really sorry she's not able to attend, but she needs to keep Thanet moving. And Nev Kemp, who's Deputy Chief Constable of Surrey Police. So I guess he's busy doing policing things.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest we need to note? Okay, thank you for that. So moving on, minutes of the previous meeting, the action log and matters arising. First of all, the minutes for approval. Are you happy the minutes of the last meeting are a true and accurate record? All silence is approval, thank you. Are there any matters arising not covered on the action log? That's all. Right, Izzy, please, the action log.
Okay, we've only got two actions that are currently open and due and not complete, but obviously happy to take questions on any of the ones we've closed or are in progress. So the two due this meeting are: how assured was the Trust that community first responders had access to the funds raised in their name, as this had been an issue in the past? I know that Charitable Funds Committee is on the agenda later, so governors may want to discuss that under the Charitable Funds Escalation Report, or I don't know if any of the NEDs present who've been at Charitable Funds wanted to provide an update now. So it's about our volunteers' access to their funds.
Yeah. Ali, is Al Reimer online?
Yeah, Al Reimer's here. I suspect it's actually best covered under the discussions from the Charitable Funds Committee anyway. but we've certainly been very conscious that we understand where funds have been raised and are reserved funds because of the nature in which they've been reserved, so that they can be used by those they were intended for. That's a fundamental principle of how we want the fund to operate.
Yes, the important thing is that from the charity funds point of view and the trust, we want to make it more straightforward for our CFRs and others to access the charitable funds and spend them in the appropriate way, and that's something which we'll have further discussions about in due course.
Yeah. And forgive me for avoidance of doubt, when I said reserved, I mean restricted.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, Isabel, is that all the action log?
No, there's one more, and that was for the Quality and Patient Safety Committee to consider our job cycle times and the reason for any increase before COVID hit us. And I know that at least Lucy and Howard have been looking into this a little bit.
Yes, and we have got some feedback on that, and I wanted to get a bit more background to the question, because the graphs that I'd certainly seen showed that the job cycle time there hadn't been a marked increase. So I was going to pick up with Malcolm, I think, who raised it separately, Izzy, just to the background, because I think he must be looking at some different data to the ones I've got.
Okay.
Do you want to do that outside the meeting then?
So I'll follow up outside the meeting.
Okay, fantastic. That's it, unless anybody's got any questions about any of the others.
Okay. So I don't see any hands raised. So can we move on to the next item, which is the Chief Executive's report, and this is where Philip is going to provide more detail on the Trust's post-COVID priorities and challenges and new services coming online. So governors may wish to direct questions raised by Philip's report specifically now, and save others for after, when Philip makes a second presentation. So Philip, your report is in the papers.
Thank you, David, and good morning, everyone. I will do the report bit first, and then stop for questions, as you say, and then we'll go on to the second item, just to make sure we've got a bit of clarity where we're on. So the report, as I say, it is there for you to read. A bit of additional stuff on the back of it. In terms of where we are with COVID, I think it's probably useful for the council to understand roughly what my understanding of the disease is, and therefore what I think is going to happen. So rather than cover what we've already done, which is in the paper, just at the moment we're in a lull. So what is happening across particularly our part of the country is that the disease is now spreading in the community, but not in a way that would suggest a second surge is just around the corner. That is happening in some parts of the country, and we'll all be aware of that from the news, and they're mostly up north, where specific actions are being taken in local areas to increase control measures when the rate goes up. So what we're looking at nationally is the 7-day infection rate, and when that gets up to 15 to 20 per 100,000 of the population, that's when the government start getting interested in the area or the town or the village in some cases, and start increasing restrictions. In our area, it's at about 7, and that's the second lowest in the country. The lowest is the southwest. But we shouldn't be sitting there thinking that's great because it's all going to be fine, because London is beginning to go up. So last week London was at 9, this week London's at 12, and if it continues on that rise, that will spread across, because of course we have incredibly porous borders, particularly with everyone going back to work. The spread is in our area and increasingly across the country. Instead of being spread amongst older folk in care homes and healthcare settings, which has been the pattern over the last month or two, it's now changing to it's being spread amongst the young. So the two highest groups are the 20s to 30-year-olds, followed by the 11 to 19-year-olds. And that's a recent change. So that's all about the younger members of community beginning to mix less carefully. So we need to keep out for a second wave, and I'll talk about that in the second part. The other bits that I just want to touch on are where we are with a couple of bits that I described in the report and have moved on a bit. And firstly, the risk assessments of our staff. We have now done all of the risk assessments of the clinically vulnerable and the BAME, and well over 90% of our total staff population. So that's really good. It's identified some people who have who need special arrangements to be made, and there are some people who are not able to return to their normal jobs not because of the risk assessment, but the risk assessment has quite rightly pointed out to increased risk in some individuals' cases, and we've taken that very seriously, as always. Staff welfare is really high on our agenda, so that's why the risk assessments were important. And secondly, the test and trace system. So we've had a speciality team pretty much since the beginning of COVID, doing various things. Firstly, they were doing staff testing, then they were doing a coordination service. That has now morphed into our own version of the test and trace service. So their job is to ensure that when one of our staff is identified as being positive, that the impact on the rest of our staff is managed carefully, i.e. to take those people who are now at risk out of the workplace for the right period of time, to stop, for example, a spread of COVID getting a hold of one of our call centres or a particular station. So that's what's going on that. I'm not going to say anything more about COVID. I've talked about ops performance in the report, and just to be clear, our ops performance has been through a really significant cycle during the COVID period. So during the lockdown, our performance was better than it ever has been before. Just before lockdown, it was really challenged as demand was really high. And as we come out of lockdown and demand has reduced to return to normal levels, and during periods of heat, and we've had two extreme periods of heat in the southeast, we've had really high demand, 15% up year on year. And so our ability to cope with that has been really challenged, particularly given the fact that the first period of heat also coincided with the period when we were still shielding. Second period of heat coincided with the end of shielding, but whilst their shielding staff were still unavailable to us. So in terms of how many staff have we still got unavailable, it's in the region of 50 a day are off with COVID-related either sickness or self-isolation because they're self-isolating for a member of their family. That's about the average. We had 150 long-term shielders, and all of those folk are back at work, give or take the odd individual now, but there are a number of them, about 50, who are not back in their frontline roles because of the outcomes of their risk assessments. So that has affected our ability to respond. On top of that, we have an increased non-COVID related sickness, which is the other point. We're working hard at replacing those folk and increasing the efficiency of our operations in order to recover our performance, and that is going relatively well at the moment. So this week we're back to better than last year in terms of performance, and coming back towards the middle of the pack in terms of ambulance services, coming back towards it. There are a couple of other bits that are in the report, and I just want to mention them very quickly. Firstly is the increase in the worrying increase, particularly in the Brighton area, in assaults on staff. This isn't only, you will have heard about it from the police, so it's not only ambulance service, it's all the emergency services are reporting this. And we are working with the other two services to try and get OpCavel, which is a specific op aimed at discouraging that from a whole range of ways, and that's a tri-service operation between us, the police, and the fire service. And that I hope will make a difference. So I just wanted to note that because we are taking that as seriously as we take any other threat to our staff. And lastly, just to note the Employees Network for Equality and Inclusion Gold Award that we've won, which is really good news, really good news. So that's the nuts and bolts of my report. I'm going to point to one issue that we've had recently that isn't in the report in a second. But firstly, I just want to note that I've been here for just over a year and a couple of days now, and I am absolutely delighted to be part of the CCAM team. I've learned just how good so many of our people are. So I have great faith for us as an organisation in the future. That year has taught me that. We have still got issues, and probably, like all NHS trusts, we'll always have some things that we can improve, and we need to work hard at those. And I'll talk about one of those issues in a second. But overall, it's been a real pleasure, and I've been thoroughly welcomed not only by the operational staff, but also by the non-operational staff and our volunteers, and of course everybody involved in supporting the trust, such as the people here today. The issue I wanted to raise, over the COVID, our clinical education team have been doing some really good stuff. So they had to move the entire education system from a face-to-face system to an online education system. That means rewriting every course and redesigning all of that. So and we've recruited significantly good people into the team. So I want to just put that on the table before I then go on to say, but we have just discovered over the last couple of weeks another backlog of marking that was partially created by that the rewriting of all the courses and the onboarding of 150 new staff that we weren't expecting to onboard early in COVID. Because of that, we got behind in marking some of the portfolios, and also the quality of the portfolios turns out not to be as good as we had predicted, and that has affected our ability to continue with our training efforts in the normal way. So we are fixing that. It's not a repeat of last year's failing, although it's really disappointing. It's mostly disappointing that we didn't spot it coming and deal with it before it started affecting students. It has affected some of our students, two limited cohorts, ECSWs who we recruited last year, and a group of AAPs, but it hasn't affected anybody who is going on to further training or should have been promoted. So nobody has suffered because of it, but I know it needs managing. And in the course of the discussion that went around that topic, I have become more aware that we have a group of ECSWs who are feeling trapped by the way in which we have changed our recruiting from recruiting ECSWs and then stopping doing that and going to recruiting external AAPs. What that's made them feel as though there is no route for them to progress. So again, that's been a useful learning function, and we will pick that up and solve that one over time. So I just wanted to get that out, and at that point I'll take questions. Thank you for the AAP explanation on the chat net. David, you're on mute.
If I could make a general point, it's not to use, if we can avoid using acronyms, or where we do, can we translate them, please? Just to make sure, given we've got members of the public, particularly who won't be used to our some of our terms. Right, who wanted to ask the first question? Are there any questions at all on that section of your report, Philip?
There's none in the chat box.
No. Okay, so should we move on to the next item, the next part of your report?
Yeah, I can do that, and then I can take general questions if there are some. So the first thing that I was asked to talk about is recovery and learning. In terms of the ambulance sector, let's start with the rest of the NHS. The rest of the NHS is absolutely focused at this point on recovery of their normal operations. So, for example, the number of people who have been waiting more than 52 weeks for important interventions for their health has gone up in the southeast from about 70 before COVID to 1,500. So it's a huge increase, and that's mirrored across the country. So there's this huge number of people who are being disadvantaged. So that's the rest of the NHS focused on getting cancer services back up and running, getting elective surgery back up and running. So that's the recovery bit that the NHS are talking about. Because the ambulance service and 111 have carried on doing their normal work throughout the crisis, we don't have that element of recovery. So ours is more about learning and improving on our pre-COVID service and applying lessons that we've learned over that period to the future. So, what have we learned? We've learned that there are some much better ways of communicating. That we've learned that it just doesn't make sense from any angle really to be pulling 100 managers into Crawley for a 2-hour meeting from Kent and Sussex and corners of Surrey, and then having a meeting and sending them home again, taking them a whole day for a 2-hour meeting, when you could do that online, and we now know that we can do it online as we are today. And it's effective for some meetings. We've also learned that there are some ways of communicating that are better done face to face. So that's one of the things that we learned, and that will be a permanent change, and some of those lessons are really good. So we can get messages to managers much more quickly and much more effectively than perhaps we ever could before, because of what's been set up during the COVID crisis. Our attention and understanding of our logistics has been significantly enhanced during the crisis, and that's a lesson that we mustn't forget. It does look like we, along with most other NHS organisations, learnt that lesson before. We learnt it when we were preparing for SARS and other epidemics, but it does appear that we forgot it because we stopped doing fit testing and we stopped making sure that we had really high levels of PPE and things like that. So now we've relearnt those lessons. It's important that that I make sure that we don't forget them, but also that we put probably more effort into the logistics end of our business, because we are in a lot of ways a logistics service. Our job is to get the right number of people with the right kit, with the right training, with the right morale and the right attitude to the right place 2,000 times a day, 7 days a week, and repeat 365 days a year. A lot of that is logistics, and I think in the past we've underinvested in the base, some of the logistic ends. So in fleet, in equipment support. So we haven't got some of the best systems. So we need to invest there, and that's a lesson that we've learned and we will improve on. There are new ways of working for non-frontline staff. That are very clear, that are going to enable us to solve some of the problems that we have, but also move forward with the sustainability agenda. We've learnt about working in systems much more quickly than we would have done had we not had COVID. So one of the examples of that, and the systems have learned to work with us as well, is that we are now getting approached to do things permanently for systems that we did at various points of the service, and it's obvious to the systems. For example, Sussex looking to us to provide an emergency transfer service for very sick patients. So they're going to establish that, and in the past they would have done that using private providers. Now they've seen it's much better to do it with someone who's got all the systems and safety in place, such as an ambulance service. So working with the systems has been another really a big area for us. There are lots of other smaller areas that the team are looking at, and this is going to be a 6 to 9 months effort. The identifying and learning those lessons, looking at every single decision that we made during the COVID crisis and saying, right, are we going to alter it? Are we going to adopt it permanently? Or are we going to abandon it, say that that was suitable for the crisis, but not for now? So that's about learning and improvement. I think I'll go on to new business next. So there are a couple of bits of really exciting new business coming up. So firstly, 111 CAS. Now we've been talking about 111 CAS.
Can you translate?
Sorry, Clinical Assessment Service. The 111 service is having added on to it a clinical assessment service. The aim of this is to make it a far more of a the NHS far more of a one-stop shop for the patient. So rather than a patient having to phone 111, be told, oh, yes, I think you need to go and see someone, and then you have to go and phone that person and make another appointment. And then when you get to the appointment, you have to then tell the person your story. So, you know, by this time you've told your story 3 times. And that person says, oh, well, actually, you don't need to see me, you need to see a pharmacist. And that's been a typical story in the past. The idea behind 111 CAS, that is the clinical assessment service will have a breadth of capability within it, and that will be all connectable, so that when a patient phones up with a particular need, it will identify the need because we've got the right clinicians in the room to do so, and connect that individual to the point of care that actually delivers that need. So in the case that I've just given you, it would direct straight to a prescribing pharmacist. Indeed, will have its own prescribing pharmacist, so it might actually solve it there and then. So the patient has made one call and has had their need met completely. So that's the basis of it. We are going to be running it for Kent, Medway, Kent, Surrey, Sussex. But not Surrey. So Care UK run it for Surrey, and they will continue to do so. They're on a 5-year contract. These contracts sometimes don't last as long as they think, and we would be interested in taking that contract from them if it became available. But at the moment, we are not doing anything about that because we can't. So that goes live on the 1st of October, so in less than 4 weeks' time. And we are going through the last steps. There are a couple of technical risks with because, like all these projects, it's all about connecting systems to other systems, and there's so many of them in the NHS that there are always going to be risks with that. But all of the big pieces, we think we've written down the risk, and so we'll be able to run the service. It will always be an improving service. So it'll never stop still. Once we started running it, we will continue to develop it. That's the basis on 111 CAS services, and the whole of the integrated urgent care is built to not be delivered at the beginning of a contract and stay the same for 5 years. It's built to be delivered to a level at the beginning of the contract and to develop over the course of the contract. And so that's really exciting. And on the back of that, one of the national lessons that have been learnt from COVID is that if you can control the flow into the emergency departments in hospitals, you can provide much better care to those people who are in hospitals. One of the ways in which people have identified that we might be able to do that is to in some way triage those people who normally walk in to emergency departments of their own free will. So I fall over at home, I've banged my knee, I decide I'm going to go to A&E because it's just down the road. Why wouldn't I? Because actually I'm causing a problem for that A&E. So the national big idea behind this is that you use 111 to triage patients like that. So instead of me walking to Frimley Park A&E from my house, I'd be told to phone 111. 111 would triage and say, no, you've got a small injury. You are much better going to a walk-in centre where they've got an X-ray functioning between now and 11 o'clock at night. By the way, I've booked you an appointment. So that is the idea behind 111, it's called Think 111 First. Some people are calling it Talk Before You Walk, and you can see why that might make sense. And where are we with that? So there are some trials going on. One trial is happening in Portsmouth, one's in London, and then there's one up north. And they're a cross between a trial and a pilot, because I think everybody's decided this is going to happen. And what's happening at the moment is that the NHS are trying to identify funding, because it will increase the number of folk that we need in 111 to provide that service, because of course this will be additional work for the 111 services across the country, on top of what they currently do, but we'll have the benefit in the ED departments. So I haven't got a contract to do this, but we are in twice weekly conversations with commissioners who are absolutely convinced that they will be asking us to do it probably from early December. So 1st of October, 111 CAS goes live. Early December, we might see that becoming even bigger because of the Think 111 First deal. On the back of that, there are lots of small conversations going on about things that we might do. So, for example, Sussex are reletting their PTS service in a year's time. Sounds a long way away, but we're beginning to do the exploratory business to see whether or not there is enough in that business for us to thank you, Katie, patient transport service for PTS. Whether there's enough in that service for us to make benefit of it. There's undoubtedly some synergies with our current businesses, and therefore it's worth us investing a bit of time looking at it to see whether or not it's something that would work for us. Kent are going to be offering out some across the whole of West Kent, Medway and West Kent, the out of hours and home visiting service. Again, because of the work that we've done over COVID, the Commissioner is now coming to us and saying, we think you'd be really good at running that. We need to make a business decision based on proper business criteria. But it is good that people are beginning to look at us for these new business opportunities they wouldn't have done 2 years ago. So new business, I think that covers that, and I'll take questions at the end. Lastly, I was asked to look ahead at the future risks. We've obviously got a possible perfect storm coming. We've got COVID still without a vaccine. We've got the flu season just about to start, and what happens at the end of December is it's not EU exit anymore, but it's entirely possible that the transition period will end without a deal, and therefore we end up with all sorts of fun and games in Kent particularly, but which will also affect parts of Sussex and the system there. You can hear that all over the news. It's beginning to get close to decision day. So we're picking up our planning earlier than we would normally to try and figure out how we affect all of those. In terms of timing, we start our flu vaccination program, and we are going to go big this year. We're going to try and get everybody done, and that's a significant change from last year and previous years, because it makes so much sense. Then that happens from October onwards. What's the timing for a virus? A bit crystal ball-y this, but there are very early signs that the first viruses may be available come Christmas. And
vaccinations.
Sorry, the first vaccinations rather than the first viruses. There are 3 viruses in level 3 testing, and 2 of them are looking really positive. And so by the end of the year, early next year, we are hoping that there will be at least one of those available to us. And it will be the NHS first, and we will be at the front of the queue or our staff will be. I'm not sure I will be, but certainly our staff will be. And that's good, but they all come with complications. So it looks like each of those vaccinations, and it could be up to 4 vaccinations to do flu and the COVID vaccine, have to be 28 days apart. So it's not going to be an overnight thing, but we'll take a lot of managing. But we are deep into the planning for that. And of course, the EU exit, things are better than they were this time last year, because some of the infrastructure that wasn't built this time last year has now been completed. But the customs and the border work is still really worryingly nascent, I think is the best way of putting it. So I think it would be wrong of us not to use our energy between now and Christmas in planning for the worst case scenarios that are beginning to be reshaped. So what's happening at the moment is the rest of the big like DFT, who are the people who provide those worst case traffic scenarios and blockage scenarios, are redoing their assumptions. They will give us those. We will then use that with the police and the local system. Sorry, Department for Transport, DFT, and we will create from that the levels of support that we need before we go out and asking for mutual aid again. So all of that is on our planning cycle. David, I think with that, I'm going to stop and ask
Thank you. That's very comprehensive. That's the current challenges of today through to taking a look forward over the next 12 months of some of the positive opportunities facing CCAP that we can look forward to, but also some challenges as well. So thank you for that. Questions, please, from the governors.
So Harvey has one, apparently.
Yes.
Good morning, Harvey.
Good morning. My initial question was the sort of the complete missing of Brexit from virtually all the documents that we've been issued for this meeting. It's wasn't in your report. I'm very pleased to hear what you've just said, but it's not in the integrated performance report in Horizon Scanning, and it just seems to have fallen off the radar. Very pleased that it's now firmly back on the radar. I suppose the question I do have on that is to what extent the previous work that's been done on planning for Brexit is going to be able to be of use, or whether that has been overtaken by various circumstances and needs to be restarted.
So the answer to that, Harvey, is absolutely is right back in the middle of our thinking. Understandably, it wasn't there when we were in the depths of COVID, but is now back, and I think that's right. In terms of the previous planning, that is so useful. It's not true, but it's a start point. So the previous planning, all based on a set of scenarios that were agreed at governmental and local level, and So as those scenarios change, and that's the bit that I was just talking about, that's the next step. We get the next set, the adjusted set of scenarios. Then the modelling will show what that will do to traffic, and therefore we adjust backwards from the planning that we made last year. So I think my shorthand for that is that yes, it's really useful. We are so much, we're not starting by any means from phase one, because just about everything is the same, apart from we're further ahead in some things. And then we'll have to continue to do that right up until the last minute, because there will be, even if it's a general no deal, there will be some deals done. They will be, you saw it before we were about to leave last time. There was the lorry driver concessions. There was the things that are mutual benefit to both sides that will still be agreed. And of course, we'll have to adjust our planning every time they do one of those. But we start from a really good place because of the planning that we did last year. Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Nigel, I saw your hand raised. Nigel Robinson.
Yes. Hello. Good morning. Yes. Thank you, David. Sorry, I couldn't get my microphone off of mute. Are you confident? That was a really interesting report, and I thank you for that. But I'm really interested to seek out your reassurance that there's going to be appropriate checks and balances particularly in regard to performance review with 111 CAS as that evolves and it becomes more detailed in terms of the medical reassurance that it's giving our clients. Are you confident that we'll have a robust performance review, checks and balances to support our staff as that evolves?
Yeah, absolutely. So our the attitude that we've taken to 111 CAS is that everything is clinically led, because we know we can run a 111 service, and we've got really good systems for making sure that the mechanics and the safety of that are measured and are tested and are routinely and we pick up issues. We have an investigation, we learn the lessons, and we change things. So all of those systems are in place. But what we're doing is we're adding things that we've never had before, like prescribing. So prescribing adds a completely new risk to CCAM, because we've never done it before. So I suspect that's one of the things that prompted your question. And yes, it does need to come with another level of clinical checking, clinical validation, and risk assessment. And we are building all of those in. So we're not on our own. Remember, we're doing this with IC24, and IC24 have been doing this as a company. So again, we bought it a little bit of that risk, and I think by adding their experience of doing all of that clinical checking on the bits that we haven't done before, and having their clinicians sitting alongside our clinicians as we design those system checks.
Thank you. I think Chris Burton, you had a question or comment, I think, in the chat section. Do you want to come in, Chris?
Yes, thanks very much for that. Very interesting session there. Really, I'm sort of looking at the Brexit plan as a whole. I think it was discussed when we originally started planning for Brexit that we would keep certain of the issues surrounding Brexit to a degree of confidentiality. If it was certainly linked to the public, we were doing certain things in certain ways. From the point of view of having a reassurance, having an insurance for us. I'm not sure if you want to elaborate on that at all. I mean, there are certain things you need to keep confidential, and I was talking about stockpiling for one of the things. I'm not sure what the plan is for that. Could you elaborate on that at all?
I don't think I'm going to, Chris. I think it's a really good question, but I'm slightly aware that this is a public meeting.
Yeah.
And therefore, talking about things that I'm going to keep away from the public in a public meeting is probably not.
Well, let's give it in context. If I may, from the chair, you know, we're an ambulance service, and we are interacting with our health partners. Clearly, what happens on the roads and the wider system will impact us. We need to keep in proportion the part we're going to play in this, but we play an important part, but we need to keep it in proportion as well. And I think the reason we've not, I think, to address Harvey's point as well as a board, we have been keeping a careful eye on this, but quite frankly, COVID, I think in this case, has dominated the agenda, quite appropriately so, because it was an immediate life-threatening issue we had to deal with. COVID's been this has been in the background, and is, as we can reflect in your morning newspapers, it's becoming more prominent, and it will be more prominent in our board business over the next 3 months for sure. Any other questions at all?
Chris is still talking, but he's on mute.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's really to qualify that statement with regards to the fact that patient care and safety is at the format of everything that we do.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's and you know, so that was at the forefront of the very detailed planning that went in, which will be carried forward into this winter period.
David, could I speak?
Of course you can. Yes.
Thank you.
Margaret, good morning.
Hello. I just wanted to really make a general comment. As everyone's aware, I'm a Kent public governor, and I'm one of the unlucky people who had to suffer the M20 between Ashford and Maidstone for a long time, where traffic was restricted. And it was restricted to such an extent, there was really no way through from Ashford, this is going London bound, Ashford to Maidstone, no way through for any emergency vehicle. And this is a great concern for everyone who uses that route, which is one of the main routes, of course, to London. So it is, it's a really important thing for us as a trust to work on, and how we are going to manage to get to patients and get patients through that bottleneck if the restrictions are that highways will put in place will be exactly the same, because there was really no way through for those vehicles. So it was more of a general comment, and just explaining to everyone at this meeting the problems that in Kent we have had, and the problems that will be faced again probably.
Thank you, Margaret. But I think, Philly, that features in our planning, does it not? And we are very mindful of that, aren't we? That risk.
Yeah.
I say, from a non-executive point of view, Marguerite, that's clearly one of the areas where we'll be in constant dialogue with executives over and where we can make representations, particularly to the political process, which I think overall the trust did very well last time in terms of making sure that our voice was heard in various places. And I think commend the executives and various non-executive colleagues who lobbied successfully when appropriate. Okay, any final questions? So we can accept, can we, Philip's report, comprehensive report highlighting current challenges and future plans. Okay, and other matters we can pick up in assurance from non-executive director colleagues in the next item. So I think we're more or less on time, which is excellent. So the next section is assurance for our non-executive directors. We're going to address the integrated performance report. And as we've got a number of new colleagues joining us today, particularly members of the public, I should explain that the integrated performance report, or IPR, is presented every 2 months to the board and provides us with an overview of performance across the trust during that preceding period. And we take the governors through that report at subsequent meetings. We've historically received the data 2 months in arrears, which quite frankly is far from ideal, but it's the best we can do given that data has to be validated, and we need to make sure that we're sharing the information that's accurate and appropriate. But the executive team been working really hard to bring us a more up-to-date picture. So when we have the meetings, we're dealing with more real-time information. And this month, the board will receive certain key information up to including the preceding month, i.e. the end of August, at our September meeting, which that'll be for the first time. And that's a breakthrough moment, as it were. So we'll take the reports as read, as the data is from back in May and was discussed at the board meeting in July. Governors also have the non-executive escalation reports from their committees on the agenda later on. I'd therefore be grateful if governors could focus their questions arising from the performance reports that can't be covered under the escalation reports. The non-executives will give you detailed feedback, but are there any items in their reports that you feel they've not covered you wish to raise? I've worked very hard on the reports and they're very comprehensive, but is there anything at all you can spot that we haven't taken into account? Okay, so colleagues you're happy to receive the performance reports. Isabel, is that all we need to transact under this particular item?
Yes, I think it just speaks, David, to the point that you just made, because we've now gone to board only meeting every 2 months and then council meeting 4 times a year. In this case, quite unusually, the data's so old for the council that I'm not surprised there aren't any questions. But I think, like you said, the non-executives will provide their assurance under their escalation reports.
Okay, thank you. Well, as we've gathered some time, then can we move then on to the Membership Development Committee? And calling on Brian Chester, the chair of the Membership Development Committee.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
As the governors know, but actually for the benefit of our guests today, I'm a publicly elected governor for Upper West, which represents Surrey, North East Hants and West London. I was elected in 2019, and I'm in my 2nd year of being elected governor and chair of the Membership Development Committee. And I'm going to refer to the Membership Development Committee as NDC and for the rest of this report. Something that's of course very close to actually what we're doing today, and I'm pleased to see the numbers of our members and public actually who are attending online. The deputy chair is Chris DeVere, who's also an Upper West public governor. The actual report that's been tabled for today to the Board of Governors is 11 pages long, but don't worry, I won't take that long. I'd just like to highlight actually some of the key points and highlights from that report, which I think are particularly relevant either to how members are represented by the NDC and how we endeavour to actually assist our governors to represent members. So the NDC is a committee of council. It advises the trust on its communications and its engagement with members, with the aim of recruiting and retaining members to ensure that they represent a good cross-section of the population that CCAM serves. And members comprise both staff and members of the public who have actually joined CCAM. And a little bit more of that at the end. NBC also plans and delivers the council's annual members meeting. Last year we were fortunate enough to be able to do that together in Kent. It will happen again today in a similar format to this. And again, I'd particularly like to thank the staff actually who are involved in doing that, in achieving what I think will be still an interesting annual members meeting today. And the NDC contributes to the realisation of the Trust vision being best place to care and best place to work. The NDC itself meets 3 times a year. All governors are entitled to join the meeting. And in addition to the governors, we have 2 staff members who have responsibility for membership and governance and engagement. I have to say, without them, actually, the rest of us would not be able to function, so I thank them. But we also have representation from staff engagement, voluntary services, and our equality and diversity division. One of the core duties of council, sitting here today, is to represent the members of the public and the wider public, i.e. even the public who have not joined us as members. And MDC focuses on ensuring that the Trust supports governors to undertake that part of their statutory role. Within the report today, it shows that our public membership numbers have gone up slightly since last year. So 3% increase from up to 9,713, and our staff members up by 9% to 4,020. Still a small percentage when you look at the population that CCAM actually serves. Also included within the wider report are reports for our Inclusion Hub Advisory Group, all staffed by Foundation Trust members, the Staff Engagement Advisory Committee, and the Patient Experience Group. These groups and the work they do provides vital input to the MDC and to enable the governors at large to discharge their duties. During the last year, this is the year until the end of March 2020, the MDC worked for the council and to produce something that's very much aimed at improving our contact with our members and staff going forward. And that was the finalisation of a membership engagement plan, which has been developed with the board, council and membership input. The work is going to split roughly into two strands, which the membership office will lead, some of which may be impacted in the 2021 year, depending on where we get to or not with the COVID pandemic. The first strand is to identify and support member engagement opportunities, which would lead and enable us to benefit the Trust priorities. To work with the inclusion volunteer and staff engagement leads, who are embedded within the structure, to make engagement with members a must-do for certain subjects and embed that into the value that the Trust actually has in its ways of working. The second strand is to support governors to engage with their constituents by using the Staff Engagement Advisory Group and getting governors to connect with our local make-ready centres and community first responder teams. The idea behind that is that the more contact governors can actually have with our constituents, the more representative we may be, but also the more members we can actually encourage to join us and make sure that overall we reflect the community that we serve. Along with that, we've actually finished a governor election communication plan, actually trying to make clear to governors or would-be governors the amount of time and the expectations that we require of them in order to discharge their duties effectively. Equally well, CCAM provides ample training and support for that and makes governors aware of that training. We've also looked in the course of the year at how the Trust could and should be seeking patient reviews and how we actually can develop the patient experience strategy with including greater member involvement. That's the, if you like, the core of the highlight. I would encourage those who can to actually read the more detailed report. There's a lot more figures and detail in there, but I would like to record a round of thanks to actually the MDC in particular. Would like to thank all the members of staff, both staff and public, for their continuing support of the Trust. It's been somewhat gratifying to see the NHS response post the year we're looking at, but what's been happening during COVID, and actually the Thursday night clap, which actually I think we all, in fact, I have a son who actually is a doctor, who one of his non-English colleagues recorded when he came into the office that I got the clap this evening. On behalf of my governor colleagues, I would like to thank the members of the Inclusion Hub Advisory Group for their passion and effort during 2019 and 2020. and will draw your attention. Please read the report and read the highlights of the report, which there isn't time to go to here. Likewise, the work of the Patient Experience Group, and thanks to all the members of the of PEG actually for doing that. Without our staff, as we've heard earlier, the CCAM operation just does not function. And whilst this report looks back to the year to 2020, we were all well aware of the immense pressure that CCAM and its staff absorbed and continues to absorb in the new COVID era. The difficulties caused by COVID membership, communication and engagement are as nothing when compared to the efforts of our frontline. So thanks to the Staff Engagement Advisory Group for their work over the past year and the work that I know they plan to do going forward for the year. And finally, if you've not yet become a member, then please join, help us provide feedback and support CCAM, and especially that front line. If you join, it's free, you can do it online. You receive a Your Call newsletter on a regular basis. I guess seeing the numbers online, the number of people who may already be members but could still join if they're not, and encourage others to. It enables you to vote for governors, and it enables you to actually stand to be a governor and participate in this wonderful organisation. I'm happy to take questions from colleagues, but hopefully, Chair, that covers it.
It does indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Brian. Any questions and comments at all from the governors? It's a comprehensive report. It's all in the paper. Colleagues happy? And I think there's a message from Katie as well, pointing out how you can sign up if you're not a member. Okay, thank you. Should we move on then to the Governor Development Committee annual report, and then also confirmation of the lead and deputy lead governor elections. So Nikki, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, hi, thank you, David. My name is Nikki Pointer, and I am a public elected governor for Lower East. And in August this year, I was appointed lead governor with Wasim Shakir as deputy lead governor. So we very much look forward to taking on these roles and supporting the council's effectiveness.
And can I say congratulations? We congratulate you as well. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
Of the council, which is much appreciated, and Wes as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Governor Development Committee is a committee that the council advises the trust on its interaction with the Council of Governors and Governors' information, training and development needs for anybody that doesn't know what we do. So our duties are to advise and develop on strategies for ensuring governors have information and the expertise to fulfil their role, and to advise on content and development sessions of the council, and propose agenda items for council meetings. So the Government Development Committee undertakes a vital function, allowing discussion between governors about our needs so that the trust can support the council to fulfil its role as effectively as possible. Now, during the last year, we met 5 times and worked on behalf of the council to provide feedback and suggest improvements to the running of the council meetings. We undertake annual review of our own effectiveness, and we coordinate governor activities to ensure representation across our patch, and we revise the council's annual self-assessment process. That's just a snippet of what we do. So the achievements of what we did last year include improving effectiveness, reviewing and developing council meetings agendas. We aligning council meetings to focus on different committees of the board to enable in-depth discussion and understanding of risk. Again, just a snippet of what we do. I would like to thank all the members of the Government Development Committee for all their hard work over the last year. And I'd also like to thank those governors who left us last year after being part of the Government Development Committee, including Felicity Dennis, who was our previous lead governor, and for her hard work as chair as lead governor, Frank Northcott, Pauline Flores-Moore, James Crawley, Marianne Trendle, and Roger Laxton. So unfortunately, all these governors have left in the previous year. Governors are asked to note that there were only 2 responses for the elections for lead and deputy lead. And as I said it before, myself and Waz are very much looking forward to taking these roles forward. So that's really all that I wanted to say about the Government Development Committee. There is the papers available if you wish to read the last minutes of what we have done. It's all there, it's all comprehensive. So I'm going to leave that there. And then I'm going to, if you don't mind, David, I'll move on to the review of governor activities and queries.
Yeah, then we'll take any questions then. Good call, yep. Nikki, thank you.
Thank you. So what we do as part of our review is we ask governors to update an online form of all the things that they've done in the past year, what they've participated in. And we've had quite a few of our previous governors that have been to different engagement forums. One of our governors, Jeff, went to a staff engagement forum and learnt more about the ambulance service. He did say at the time he thinks the event would be useful for other governors to attend, so that's definitely one to put in the diary. We also had Felicity in March attended the Surrey Heartlands Partnership event and talked about CCAM informally and contributed views to discussion. So we do try to get out and about, and we do try to engage with our constituents, and we do spread the word about, as Brian said, about our membership and encourage people to join the membership for CCAM. So again, that's all in the report if you want to see what we've been doing and where we've been out and about. I also want to say that there were some really outstanding questions for the governors when we put our governor queries and information requests into the non-executive directors. It demonstrates that the governors are committed to their role in between their meetings and that we are submitting substantial questions to our NEDs to gain assurance that we are moving forward with the trust visions. Now, that again, this is a really comprehensive report, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we have asked of our non-executive directors. One of them surrounding serious incidents and clinical training. So we do ask quite substantial questions, and we do get reports from the NEDs, from the non-executive directors, in answer to our questions. So again, I really would like to thank all the governors for all their quite outstanding questions. There is about 24 pages in the report covering quite a lot of questions. So if you do want to read it and see what we are getting assurance for from the trust, then please do. It's quite interesting. And on behalf of myself and the chair, I'd like to sincerely thank all the governors for the amount of work that they do undertake in their role. So I am happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Nikki. So questions on the actual annual report of the Development Committee and on the activities of the governors, who have, I'd say it's a very comprehensive report, Nikki. You certainly have been active. Congratulations.
Yes, we have.
Accountability of public life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're comfortable with the reports. We can receive the reports. Okay, thank you. Well, we are running slightly ahead of time, which I think is beneficial and should enable more deeper discussion for items.
David,
oh, is there a question?
Sorry, yes, Malcolm has a question.
Malcolm, hello. Sorry, I missed you there. I actually flagged up on my screen, Malcolm. I missed you. No, my apologies.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I have a question about the just the last bit about the governor queries paper. It seems that there don't seem to be any marked after the 20th of March 2020. I'm sure there's been a number since then from myself and probably others. I'm just wondering if we're capturing all of the queries that are going to the non-executive.
There's April and May and July in there, I think.
It's I can answer that, David. Yeah. It's because it's an annual report, Malcolm. So when you come to the next council meeting, you'll have anything that was asked between March and the next council meeting. So okay, it's a bit of a lag because we don't hold this. We do annual reports today because we get a bigger turnout of the public. So yeah, it's just a last financial year.
Fine. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Can we move on? If there are no other, I can't see any hands raised. Thank you. So we slightly ahead of schedule. Can I propose that we take our comfort break now, and reconvene at 11:30. Is that fit with our timetable as well? Yeah, so we'll have a break now and reconvene at 11:30. Okay, it's now 11:30 and we are with a little bit ahead of time, which is fortunate, so we can get into more detailed discussion on key matters. So the next stage is the sort of performance and holding to account section, and this is where the council, for those people who are new to the meeting, the council receives regular reports from the board committees, which are chaired by my non-executive colleagues. So the reports are focused on highlighting key issues of risk and assurance, and they're here to update the council on what the non-executive directors are doing, what concerns they may have about performance of the board. We've got a deep dive session into the work of the Workforce and Wellbeing Committee, which will come after the routine reports, and of the Appointments and Remuneration Committee. Both chairs are primed to take you through those. So what I'd like to do is work through the reports as they appear in the papers. Hopefully your papers are in the same excellent order as mine, and ask each NED colleague who chairs the committee just to sort of bring out any headlines they wish to share with the committee. So the first one is the Workforce and Wellbeing Committee. I know, Laurie, you're going to take us into a deep dive a little bit later, but there's your summary report is before the board, and you will be able assisted by Terry Parkin, who is your immediate past chair as well, if there are any continuity matters. So, Laurie, is there anything you wanted to bring out to the attention of the council from your headline report to the board?
Not particularly. I think we're going to cover a lot of the issues actually in what you're calling the deep dive.
Yeah. Are colleagues comfortable? You're comfortable with that, council members? We'll pick up. So hold your question on HR workforce issues until then, please.
Next one should ask David is Terry. Are you comfortable with that as the sort of chair of the other half of the year?
Yes, of course, that's fine. It's better to do it all at the same time, I think, in terms of continuity.
Okay. Let's do that. Thank you. Quality and Patient Safety Committee, Lucy.
Hello. So you can see we've got 2 escalation reports that went to the board meeting at the end of July. We have had a number of QPS meetings given the COVID virus and the number of decisions that we've had coming through. What we have tried to do is make those more extraordinary meetings and keep to the agenda of the every other or every 6-week meetings that we have for QPS, so we don't lose track of the other things that are going on and become overcome by the COVID. So what you see there is one was an extraordinary meeting and the other one was a sort of a more standard QPS meeting. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And just to make the point, the board has been determined, and with this virtual way of working, has maintained a normal meeting agenda throughout the emergency. And I think that's been important, and normal business has been transacted in significant volume as a result. Colleagues, any questions of Lucy with the report from this clearly very important committee? Marcia?
Yes, thank you.
Come in, Marcia. Can you
hear me?
I think just to turn your volume up a little bit, please.
So my question, just a quick question really, about the EOC Emergency Operations Centre Clinical Safety Project, and just how assured are you that throughout this project that the Trust is actively engaging and supporting this particular staff group?
I know that we looked at this in the round, the EOC. Oh, hi, I can see you in the corner now. We looked at this in the round. So obviously staff welfare is more WWC, but we did look at this in the round, and I do know there's been a number of issues in EOC that we have discussed. So I am comfortable that this has taken EOC as a whole rather than just looked at one part of EOC, because it's clear that that isn't how we're going to get to where we needed to be in the EOC group.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did see another hand raised. I'm just unable to identify who raised it.
We've got Jeff Kempster's raised.
Yeah, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff. Good morning.
Hey, Jeff.
Good morning. Hi, Lucy. Just a quick, I'm really following what Marsh is talking, is the callback. Are we comfortable now that EOC on the 999 calls are doing the timely callbacks to patients who are delayed, where we have delayed responses?
No, I am not confident. And so I've got my agenda for next week in front of me. And the first item I've got is scrutiny as welfare callbacks. So it was one issue as we went through in that July meeting that was clear it wasn't where we would want it to be. So I've asked for a specific paper on welfare callbacks to include clarity around capacity of resources to respond to the demand, because it's also about which resources we use to do that. So that is an area that we are still struggling in.
All right, thank you for that.
And that will be there's focused work in that area, Jeff, which Lucy is leading. And Katie's just reminded colleagues, EOC Emergency Operations Centre, and for those new people on the call, it's the vital part of our front line. It's where we receive the call from the public and coordinate all of our activities. So it absolutely is crucial to patient safety and the efficient deployment of various resources we use to care for patients. So it's very crucial. I think, Waz, did I see your hand raised? Then followed by Malcolm.
Hi, thank you. Mine's in relation to clinical outcomes with strokes in particular. There's a few diverts in place, notably in Kent and East Sussex. The committee reports are assured on clinical outcomes, but the integrated performance report shows an increase in times from call to arrival at hospital for stroke patients. It seems to be an upward trend as well. So are you assured that we're going to be performing better, reversing that trend and so on?
We did discuss strokes in there. What we specifically looked at actually was clinical outcomes throughout COVID. What we wanted to do is understand, were our outcomes in line with others? Had we gone out of kilter with other ambulance trusts as well? So that was kind of particularly what we were looking at there. I know there's been a few diverts, and that will I will make sure that we discuss that at the next meeting, Waz. I can't say that we're assured we're going to turn it around, but I do know we have an awareness that there's an issue there.
But I think we can say, Lucy, as well, that we have been working closely with the trusts in Kent. I think our clinical teams have been working closely with Fiona Moore and team with the hospitals to plan stroke services.
And I think that is a positive, actually. So it's not a surprise. In the past, maybe in my earlier days here, there would be changes that we would be on the receiving end of rather than part of the discussion of. And I think it shows how we've progressed, that actually we're in those discussions. So I do take that as a positive.
Malcolm.
Thank you very much. I have a question that's not on your report. Okay. It has recently come to light that there had been a plan to remove our tympanic thermometers in favour of tempered dot thermometers. I won't go into details of why this is an issue. For clinical colleagues will understand that ultimately this is, to put it briefly, is not a safe or feasible solution. I understand the work has now been paused, but my understanding that really the main driver for this was one of financial considerations. I know there are other issues, but my understanding is that the underlying one is one of finances. My question, therefore, is are you confident, or how are you assured that the financial considerations are not overshadowing the clinical considerations when such decisions are being made?
So the process, Malcolm, by which we should be assured is that they undertake a risk assessment for every project or change, and this should be, the review should take everything in the round. So that is the process that this should have followed through the organisation. I actually, on my next agenda, have that as AOB because I had become aware in the last week that there were some concerns about this and from the frontline staff. So I can't give you an answer, but I can, on my agenda, show you. I penciled in yesterday as we were talking, we had a NED meeting, I penciled it in as an AOB item on the agenda that we have for the next meeting. So there is a process, and I will check that process is followed as part of seeking to understand, and I can feed that back to you.
Malcolm, can I also say, though, on behalf of the board, I mean, the non-exec directors, particularly the Finance Committee and the Quality Committee, there's cross-membership. And we do work very diligently to make sure that when we are looking at efficiency programs, etc., that we do impact analysis. The executives that initiate those, and my colleagues do scrutinise that in some detail, because we do have to strike efficiency of operation against clinical outcome, and that features constantly in board discussions, at committee, and at the board itself.
And we do, David, but if the value is of a certain value, it wouldn't reach that committee. And I suspect
this is an operational matter at the moment, and certainly has not been raised formally with. It's what we've picked up.
Yeah, is that sufficient, Malcolm?
That is sufficient. Thank you. My one other comment is that I do feel that if this had been brought to light to frontline staff members earlier, that the feedback would have been very, very clear to the relevant managers that this would cause significant issues. So again, I wouldn't put it as a question, but a comment would be regarding staff engagement, really, about such things in order to, exactly.
That's a good comment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Malcolm. I think we would agree with that. Thank you. Thank you. We move on now to the.
Sorry,
questions. One more. Howard Prescott.
Sorry to apologise.
I'm getting the hang of it. I like it when they pop up on the screen because first of all they start talking, it's blank, and then you get a picture. Howard.
Hi there, thank you. And just so people are, I'm the appointed governor from Sussex Community NHS Foundation Trust as one of the governors here. Thanks, Lucy. Just a question in terms of, there was an item obviously within the Chief Exec's report where it was talking about the performance improvement plan.
Yeah.
And I just wondered the oversight that there was from quality and safety in terms of any incidents or any issues around clinical activity in relation to performance and how that's monitored, and if there has been any note of any issues around clinical incidents with the reduced performance.
Okay. So the performance improvement plan in itself is overseen by the Finance Investment Committee. Within the Quality Committee, what we will do is look at incidents and serious incidents, and if there are any trends, we would bring those in more detail. So looking at my next agenda, which I hold in my sticky hand, one of the ones that areas we're going to look at is safety as discharge, because when we did look at incidents and serious incidents, what we saw is a number of issues coming up about discharge of patients by non-clinician frontline personnel, and so we've asked for that to come specifically. So that is how that process would work. So we would pick up anything, and I sit in FIC, fortunately, the Finance Investment Committee, so when that comes up, I'm able to then bring it into the agenda, so that in fact works very smoothly. But that's how it works. But that's an example of something that I've picked up that's come through.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions of quality and patient safety?
I can't see any.
Okay, thank you. So we move on now to the work of the Audit Committee. And Michael, the chair of the committee, is online.
Just, Chair, to say good morning. And the only point that I would bring to Council's attention is that you will be aware, like many foundation trusts, we received additional money to respond to COVID. Obviously, our first concern is making sure that that money benefits CCAM patients and the communities which we serve. But we also have a statutory duty to ensure that the money is used appropriately within and appropriate controls are applied. So as an audit committee, we took assurance from the executive that appropriate controls were in place and continue to be in place, and we will continue to monitor that going forward. But I think it's important that Council can be assured that CCAM have used the money appropriately as intended, and appropriate controls are there. That's probably the only item that I would bring to Council's attention, but I'm very happy to take any questions relating to the work of the committee, and particularly our emphasis on making sure that appropriate risk management is in place.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions at all? Okay, shall we move on then to the work of the Finance and Investment Committee? And Howard Goodburn is online. Good morning, Howard.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. So the report of the Finance and Investment Committee, the first item is operational performance. Obviously, Philip has gone through that in a fair amount of detail, but we are acutely aware of the trends on the operational performance side. So ironically, during COVID, the performance was particularly good, but that we have struggled since. Now, there have been some challenges directly a result of COVID, so deferred holidays having to be taken, and sickness and exhaustion, I think, post-COVID. And issues with the fit testing, which has also been touched on, have contributed to some challenges in terms of performance. And so an improvement plan was put together to ensure the hours delivered on the front line. That has also presented challenges as well. So we are acutely aware of that. And again, we'll be monitoring that very closely. So next meeting next week, we'll be looking at that and of our resilience to ensure the performance on those areas. So as of yesterday, I think we managed to get the category 1 and 2 achieved, but still struggling on 3 and 4. And yeah, over the last few weeks, it has been a challenge, but we are on top of it. We will be questioning around the improvement plan, which is, as I say, putting hours on the front line as fast as we can. But we will be challenging the executive on that, continuing as well. The only other point I think would raise is the 111 clinical assessment service that we've also touched on earlier on. What I would say there is that there have been challenges on that front, and I think the executive team have done a very good job basically to avoid some of the key technical IT risks associated with integrating our system with another system, of IC24 system, which I think avoids a lot of the systems risk that would have ensued from that, so that there will be now a single, namely Cleric, the system we used, and the IC24 will be using that system. That's de-risk that element of it, but there are clearly other risks associated with delivering that service, but that IT systems risk has reduced substantially, and I think the team did a good job navigating that solution with IC24.
Thank you to you and to Michael Whitehouse for the work you're doing in supporting that the executive team with the work they're doing with the 111 project. But in terms of the overall report then of the Finance Investment Committee, obviously key committee, any questions? We've got questions from Graham and Marcia. Graham Gibbon, first of all.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Graham Gibbons. I am a member of Kent County Council, and I'm an appointed governor representing the 6 leaders of the 6 local authorities in the upper tier authorities in the CCAM area. Howard has already mentioned the 2 points I want to ask a question about, basically 999 performance and the 111 and clinical assessment service. I mean, the issue about 999 performance was that the Finance and Investment Committee was only partially assured, due to the deterioration of performance in July, which was caused by a reduction in staff hours. They were satisfied the executives were giving the issue the right level of focus. I mean, I've heard what Howard has said, and I'm encouraged by what he said. However, I would like some clarification as to what impact is the situation having. The board is not assured. What impact is this having on deterioration, having on patients, and what is being done to address that deterioration? Because I assume there has to be some. And the other point, I haven't got to speak again, Chairman. 111 and the clinical assessment service for Kent Medway and Sussex, the service plan for the 1st of April, it was announced that this was going to be launched on the 1st of October. The Investment and Finance and Investment Committee was assured the service will be able to mobilise from the 1st of October. I mean, my question to Howard is, how assured are the NEDs about the, not executive directors, I'm sorry, about mobilisation of the new 111 CES service on the 1st of October before winter and before a potential second peak? Are you quite comfortable that this is okay to take place on the 1st of October before several quite uncertain events could happen? Just 2 points, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Howard, you want to make an initial response?
Yeah, okay, so if I deal with that 111 CAS question first, obviously we are well aware of the challenges of the 1st of October, and I've raised that specific point with them, saying it's not an ideal time to be launching such a project, but we are in effect required to do that. The team have been working very hard over the summer post-COVID on this project, and as I say, dealing with some of those IT issues has been a significant de-risking of it. But there is a major project that's been going on all the time, ready to launch. And yes, I think it's not risk-free. Timing, in an ideal world, you would possibly wait till later on, but we don't have that luxury. But I think they are as well prepared as they can be in the circumstances. The project has been worked on very hard over the summer, and extracting some of the main risks and managing the others. So I think we are assured that we are able to go live on the 1st of October. I'm not. It's not a risk-free option. None of these things are, but they are as well prepared as I think as they can be. On the 999 operation performance, I don't know if Lucy wants to add, but I'm not specifically aware of any issues from a clinical perspective that have arisen directly as a result of this, but clearly, certainly in the category 3 and category 4 issues, it's more of less of a clinical thing, but just not acceptable performance from a customer perspective to be waiting for such a long time. Category 1 and 2, I mean, by and large, although the 90 percentile has been achieved on most days, the mean has been missed on a number of days, albeit by seconds, albeit that those are crucial seconds, I understand, obviously. But it is sort of 17, 20 seconds that the mean has been missed by. As I say, I'm unaware of any specific problems that have been caused, but we continue to put pressure and question the management to try and constantly improve those, making sure category 1 and 2 are the most important ones first, and then as of yesterday, as I say, category 1 and 2, all those were achieved, but category 3 and 4 have not been, so we just need to make sure that we can deliver across the board, and it is at the moment seemingly about delivering hours on the front line in the face of some adversity from, for example, staff being subject to track and trace and having to then self-isolate when that was obviously unplanned absence and abstraction. So those are the challenges they're facing. But the challenge I put to them is to say, we need to over deliver on the frontline hours to ensure that any challenges like that we unexpected things that we receive are built so that we have some resilience capacity to deal with unexpected issues, and that we can still deliver in spite of those.
Thank you, Howard. Lucy, anything you wanted to add? You're on mute, Lucy.
No.
There we go. Sorry, it was my iPad resting on my thingamy. I'm unaware of any specific trends at the moment. So if there is a series of incidents or SIs that come through that is caused by something, then I would have been given a heads up. I haven't. So at the moment, I'm unaware. But as I say, we've got our next QPS meeting next week, so I will be better briefed then.
But that question features in my weekly meetings with the chief executive as well. It's crucial. It's something with the whole board is cited on, and we want to ensure we do the best by our patients. But there are some genuine operational challenges which people are rising to, but they're getting the appropriate support and scrutiny from board, the whole board.
Well, thank you for that assurance, Chairman.
Thank you. Marcia and then Malcolm.
Yeah,
Marcia?
thank you. Thank you. It's still to do with the 999 improvement plan. Obviously, it sounded like you were sort of partially assured about how well this is working. First of all, do you think that the trust response was prompt enough? Because some of the issues that have been identified, you could kind of predict them that was going to happen, and do you think that perhaps the trust can learn from that so this doesn't repeat? For instance, if there is a second wave or with Brexit or anything, and if you think that this plan is sort of working, how can this be sustained in the future, do you think?
Yes, good question. I think the only way it can be sustained is to basically, as I said, build in some resilience, so overcapacity to deal with these circumstances. So we will be challenging the executive to not try and constantly aim for this sort of fine line of the sort of minimum level of hours and then keep missing it, as seems to be the case, but to actually try and over-deliver on those hours to deal with problems as they arise. And yes, absolutely, I think there's a learning on this in terms of speed of response and realization. To be fair, I think we were a little bit off guard because of the delay in the sort of reported information, but we're on top of it now in terms of understanding what the issue is, and we obviously requested the improvement plan that you refer to deliver the frontline hours. But I think there's a lot of learning that can happen, absolutely, in terms of timing of response on these problem areas. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcia. Malcolm, then Harvey.
Thank you very much, Howard. That answered these on very well to my question with regards to how many hours the trust is putting out there, and it's very reassuring to hear that you'll be pushing to have a bit of slack in the system rather than a sort of a bare bones operation. That is what my question is about. Is that there is a rumor, and I'm afraid it is just a rumor that I've heard, that the trust has cut its target hours in terms of provision of frontline hours per day from approximately 10,000 to under 9,000. And if this is just a simple misunderstanding or one of these unfounded rumours, then I'll be more than happy for just a simple clarification. But are you aware of any such change in that?
No, I'm not aware of such a change. So I'm hoping it is a rumour only. Yeah, I'm not.
Can I bring in the chief executive at this point, though, because one of his jobs is to bust rumours. Philip, is there anything you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's a rumour, and so the target is that the target varies with time of year and demand. It's set at the level that you need to achieve performance. So it does move about, but it's the target is the level of hours that you need to achieve the performance across the board. And when we're below it, that's when we typically fail to hit the targets. If we're above it, we tend to be above it. But the target is set at that level and never moved from that. Whether we achieve it or not is a different matter. But the target doesn't change.
Can I make a general point, though, in terms of resources? I mean, clearly the trust has to work within the wider NHS, and we've been in the CCAM's been locked in the process for several years to secure more resources in order to meet demand. And that's an ongoing dialogue we have with our commissioners. We enable that conversation by being an efficient and effective organisation, and that's what we're striving to be as well, that we can demonstrate we're using all of our resources appropriately, and that's subject to board scrutiny to make sure that's the case. And then when we are making, we can demonstrate, we can show increased demand, we can then make an argument for increased resources. That's the kind of balance we're trying to strike all the time. And we need, that's why we need the scrutiny. We also need the support of the workforce to understand the motives, and the motive is to get the right number of people in the right place at the right time. That's what we're trying to achieve here. Any other questions, Malcolm? Your points have been addressed?
Very much so. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for that point. I think Harvey, you were next in line.
Yes, it's a question really regarding the report and accounts. In there, under Director Remuneration, it shows an increase of about £150,000, which is a 12% increase. And when you look at the remuneration report, although it talks about the levels and standards and things like that, it doesn't actually, as far as I can see, address why there's been that increase. Now, I'm aware that during the year we had an interim HR director who undoubtedly costs considerably more than if we'd have an appointed one. But would you like to give us a comment as to why there is an apparent 12% increase for directors, particularly thinking about the public perception when the rest of the NHS is held to low single figures?
Yeah, can I just, so this may be a question which will come into the discussion with the Remuneration Committee as well. So Howard, if you, whether you can add anything, I can ask Al to comment if you're not.
Yeah, I think it's probably more appropriate for Al to comment, if that's okay.
Al, can I call you into the conversation?
Yeah, by all means. No, and thank you, Harvey. And I think we would just need to look very specifically at the set of circumstances around the question you ask, and it's probably more appropriate for an answer, a full answer out of committee. But I actually think you've probably got quite close to the reason why in any one annual reporting year the percentage has changed significantly. Because of a set of circumstances where we've had interims, whatever. But I wouldn't wish to say that was specifically the case for that. What I can say, and we'll touch on when we talk in a bit more detail about the Appointments and Remuneration Committee, is that we've just conducted a very thorough benchmarking exercise to look at the sorts of salaries that equivalent and bigger and smaller trusts, not just ambulance trusts, pay their executives, so that when we do our reviews of executive salaries, we can pitch them at the right level. Our absolute aim is to attract, retain and motivate our high caliber executive team. But the board and the trust is absolutely committed to recognising that it also has to be proportionate and see that we don't accidentally contribute to salary inflation, so that NHS money goes to the wrong areas and doesn't always benefit the patient.
Just to say, Harvey, we can pick up the issues. I can demonstrate later on the rigour which we put into making sure that executive salaries are value for public money, and we're not giving any bonanza pay rises, I can assure you.
I personally don't think that is the case, that in those bonanza pay packages or anything like that. And from everything I've seen, I'm pretty convinced that we've got things right. What does concern me, though, is somebody looking at our report and accounts and looking at the remuneration report, there isn't something which actually flags that the reason there is a 12% increase is this, that we had certain circumstances or whatever. And I just wonder if some additional commentary in there would avoid, let's say, a public perception, particularly by people who are not accountants and not used to reading things, of just saying, well, that seems a bit wrong.
Okay, so and I think, David, I will certainly take that away as chair of PARC to see that we go through that process when it comes round to annual reports in the future. And then by the sounds of it, that probably answers your original question sufficiently, if that's the action we take away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thanks for the question. That's a good point you made there, Harvey. I think we need to make that more clear, just to reassure. Right. Any other questions on this item? Forgive the noise. That's a van outside my window on his way out. Thank you. Right. Let's move on to the next item, which I think is the Appointments and Remuneration Committee.
Okay, thank you. And really briefly, just as Laurie did, because we've got the focus on this after the escalation reports. You've got the escalation report that went to the board from recent work of ARC. We ran through, we have completed a lot of the responsibilities of the Appointments and Remuneration Committee over in its annual cycle. And I think we were assured on all the items you can see there, and I'll expand a little bit on how that's going to help us as we look ahead. But it also gave reassurance to the members of ARC, who comprise all the non-executive directors, that we've actually got an increasingly robust set of procedures in place, so that we can assure ourselves appropriately about all the responsibilities which are in the terms of reference. But happy to take any questions on the escalation report itself now, and then we can talk in more detail as you wish in a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Al. Any questions on that paper? Thank you. Hope that's all clear. Let's move on now to the Charitable Funds Committee. And Michael, you can take us the headlines of that.
Sorry, I was just unmuting my computer. Again, good morning. Just to say, on the Charitable Funds Committee, we meet twice a year. I assumed chairmanship of this in January of this year. What we're focusing on is two general principles. We want to make sure that we have got processes and controls in place that are sufficiently robust but light touch to enable those that dedicate their time to raising money for CCAM and its people have access to that money as quickly as possible to use it for the benefit of all those that we serve and our important workforce. At the same time, we recognise that we have a statutory duty to ensure that CCAM and its charities comply with the rules and regulations set by the Charities Commission. So at our meeting in January, we reviewed the terms of reference of our committee, and we met again in the summer, and what we're focusing on now is making sure that those processes and controls are appropriate as necessary. And I know very much the comment that was made at the very beginning of the meeting that it is important that all those involved in raising money for CCAM have access to it and can see that it is adding benefit to our communities, and that is a key priority for us. Also, that we noted at the last meeting the additional money that was raised in relation to COVID, which was very impressive, and we took assurance that this money was being used appropriately to support our people. David, that's broadly what I would like to say at this point.
Thank you, and I think on behalf of the trust and all of our staff, I just want to formally record our thanks to the wider public and to the various charitable funds who've donated, particularly during the COVID crisis. I think it has been, I know, well received by our staff, but it was a significant morale boost at a time of challenge, and I think we are immensely grateful for that support and hope that continues into the future. So, any questions for Michael as chair of the Charitable Funds Committee?
We've got Lee Westwood.
Lee, hi Lee.
Hi, good afternoon. Lee Westwood. I represent Lower East and Lower East Sussex and Brighton. Michael, thank you. I know this the CFR access to funds has been an issue that's been going on for some time. There was some very promising communications at the beginning of the year, but in my STL role, I deal with a lot of teams, and they're still saying there's a lot of difficulty accessing funds and getting agreement on how much funds they have within CCAM. Can you assure me that this is something that's going to be resolved fairly soon?
Certainly I can, and I wasn't aware of the concerns in your particular area. Can I take that away and look at that and get back to you? We take this very seriously. David, as chair, and I have been discussing this quite extensively. So if you're happy, I will get back to you on that particular point.
I'm more than happy, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just Lee, I think perhaps with your help and other senior colleagues, we will be looking to sort of start a dialogue with our CFR colleagues on this as well, because we've got to strike a balance between probity and access to funds. And I think it's fair to say, I think we don't acknowledge some of our systems can take longer than necessary. So we do need to strike that balance. So we will be back in touch with you. It certainly has been brought to the attention of non-executive colleagues on that committee.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the question, Lee. I think Philip Astor wants to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Without embarrassing anyone, I just thought it would be appropriate to recognise the role that one of our members, Katie Spendith, played in securing quite a lot of that COVID money. So I think it's worth noting it was a personal crusade that went very well.
Yes, and Katie, please record your own vote of thanks. That's the staff are very grateful. Thank you for what you did.
David.
Yeah.
Hi. Could I, at this point, ask a general question of the NEDs and possibly more specifically to Lucy? Something I've been thinking about for a while. CCAM always has many very interesting projects in development, and I'm wondering if these are still being captured on a register or a log, so all are able to receive proper scrutiny before going live. This was a problem a while back, and I would like assurance that all projects are being captured now.
You're on mute, Lucy.
Keep getting the wrong end of the stick. So Marguerite, as you know, it was one of the big issues that came out of our history. And so there is, as I said to Malcolm, a process for these decisions that go through a quality review, and that those projects should all be captured. We do look at it annually at Quality and Patient Safety Committee I haven't got the cycle of business this year, but I will make sure that we do review it again and also do some research into making sure that things are on there that should be. I did, just as an aside, which goes through a similar process, we look at the cost improvement plans, and that came to the Quality Patient Safety Committee last time. And one of the key questions, and I sent the paper back, was, has that gone through the review that is needed? Because it told me it did, but it didn't evidence that it had. And actually everything had a yes. And I said, well, that's great, but you need to come back this time with the evidence. So I will make sure that we review that, but it has been regularly reviewed. Can I say everything goes through in an organisation this big? No, I can't, but I do know the process is in place. Philip, did you have anything to add to that?
No, thanks, Lucy. I think you've got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee. I think, Laurie, I saw your hand raised.
Yes, it's an interesting issue, Marguerite. I'd like to go to the other end of the path of a project. And as Lucy said, we're pretty good, I think, at making sure projects are well managed and the risks are understood. But what you've raised is interesting, and I'm going to follow it up about how well we learn from them. So since I've been in the trust, I've seen very clever stuff around mental health, about maternity services, about working with community guardians down in Kent. And they are evaluated in their own rights, but I'm not sure that as a trust, we actually take that learning and think about how they might be used to develop services to patients and to the communities in other parts of our region. So I think that's an interesting issue. I'll have a look at that and see if that's something the WWC might be concerned with.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Laurie. I can't see any more hands raised, so should we move on 2 minutes behind time to the next item, item 2820. And this is to provide, this section is to give governors more insight into each committee, and we take at each of these meetings we take a deep dive into the work of certain key board committees. And so today we're going to be looking at the Workforce Committee and of the Appointments and Remuneration Committee. So Laurie, do you wish to, can you please take us into?
So in fact, David, I hope it's not going to confuse people, but I think it'll give the right split on time. Laurie and I have agreed that we'll do Appointments and Remuneration Committee first.
Okay, thank you for that.
Because that in past that's been relatively brief. So I'll start. Good afternoon again, everyone. At the COG on the 5th of March, it was the last time we spoke about this, and I gave an upbeat resume of the work of the ARC over the previous 12 to 18 months. I'm really pleased to say that the appointments that we'd made over that period to the executive team have worked really well, and also since March we've continued to refine and improve on the ARC processes as we promised to do. Last time I described the ARC's responsibilities with regard to executive appraisals, and at the June meeting we discussed the appraisals with Philip. And we also took a systematic overview of the future executive team succession planning and of board structure and balance. This included discussion of the DOPS post, that's the Director of Operations post, just at the time that Joe Garcia had announced his personal plans to step down from the Trust in spring. I think ARC is really grateful to Joe, not just for everything he does normally anyway, but for actually making his intentions clear well in advance. And that's given us a chance to consider how Joe might be succeeded. And the ARC is now working with the CEO on any revisions, adjustments to the role, and getting a really good search started for a successor to Joe. You'll also be aware that Steve Emerson is leaving the executive team, so the ARC will be building on its discussion of the board structure and balance from its June meeting to advise on any further changes to executive portfolios as a result of that change. And since March, as I said in the escalation report, we've received assurance on a number of things, including the rigour of our fit and proper person review processes. We've completed the work on the executive remuneration policy, and as I said earlier, conducted that benchmarking review. What we're really hoping on that, not only will that help us deal with our annual reviews of salaries, which we quite rightly are required to do, but it will also put us in a good place if and when the Trust's responsibilities change as a result of our position in the health economy and the strength of executive portfolios changes over time. And finally, before I invite any questions, just to say, again, I think all the members felt that by actually working through these processes in a systematic way, they help business this year, but also will put us in a good position to be assured as to how we're doing all the responsibilities of the Appointments and Remuneration Committee into the future. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Al, and thank you for your leadership of the committee. Questions and comments from council members? Hopefully we've covered it. Al's covered the detail there. Anything? Shall we then move on to the Workforce Committee? Thank you, Al. Laurie?
Thank you, David. I've been asked to give an overview of the work of the WWC and to talk over particularly the issues that are likely to warrant our attention over the coming year. I took over as chair of the committee in April from Terry Parkin, my non-executive colleague, and he's quite a tough act to follow. My background before joining the Trust was working on strategy work, whole system change, organisational and management development, mainly in public services. And that meant I'm an expert, I suppose, in a lot of the committee's business, but nothing prepares you for the range and indeed depth of analysis that's required within the committee. So for me, it's a steep learning curve, and I'm very grateful that Terry, my predecessor, is here to support me as I climb up it. If I look back at the concerns of the committee since I joined it, or since I became chair, they've really been dominated by our dealing with COVID. So the agenda's been full of stuff around recruitment and reassignment, about PPE, about sickness and self-isolation, the workings of the Wellbeing Hub, and generally assuring that good governance was there despite the crisis. And in general, I think it's fair to say the committee were really impressed by the amazing response that people across the Trust have had to the pandemic. We're really proud of what's been achieved. CCAM, perhaps not surprisingly, is very good at responding to emergencies. Another major concern of the committee has been to seek assurances that ongoing problems with HR processes have been resolved. We're talking about issues about expenses, licenses, insurance, timesheets, DBS checks and the like. And it seemed as if they'd been dealt with in the past in a piecemeal way, and that itself had caused a great deal of aggravation within the Trust. And although we're still only partially assured, I think it's fair to say that the WWC are confident that the executive are finally getting a grip of these basic HR functions. And I'd like to say I think that's in no small part because of improvements to the quality and capacity of the HR team itself. As was mentioned earlier, this is the first time for a long time that we've had a full-time HR director. We've had a succession of temporary, short-term, interim directors, which I really think has hammered hampered the work of the department. But now we have Ali Mohammed, and as an experienced and committed HR professional, we can already see that he's working hard to reshape and revitalise our existing HR team and also recruiting new skills and competencies. It's interesting, I had the pleasure of getting to know the HR team, virtually of course, at the end of June, and I was really impressed not only by their expertise, but by their obvious energy and motivation. And so I think this has finally given CCAM the capacity and the capability to tackle some of the serious workforce and welfare issues that beset us now and into the future. In the past, the WWC has had a very strong and proper focus on looking back and scrutinising what the Trust has done. Now, that's okay in a stable environment, but I think the circumstances in which we now operate are anything but stable. And so we're going to see, I think we're going to require a shift in emphasis. So in addition to scrutineering the past, I think the WWC is going to have to focus even more attention on the future, seeking assurances from the executive that workforce and welfare issues, they're scanning ahead, they're anticipating changes out there in the external world and formulating appropriate responses. Also, I guess as part of the OD agenda, we'd like to be assured that they're capable of managing changes in a swift and nimble way. We suggest, I think, that without that shift to a more future focus, the committee can't be confident that we'll have a satisfied workforce of the right capacity and capability to provide the best possible care to our patients and to the communities we serve. I mean, those changes, we could see many of them looming before COVID. Demand for our services was rising, and the money, I guess now particularly, will be increasingly tight, which may test the NHS ability to work collaboratively. And on top of all that, the health system is going through perhaps the biggest restructuring since 1948. There's an orgy of acronyms, ICSs, ICPs, PCNs and the like, but make no mistake, it's going to mean big changes for CCAM, new customers, new commissioners, new partnership arrangements and new ways of working. And as Philip has already suggested, we're beginning to see the emergence of new pathways for an urgent and emergency care, with different ways of triaging patients people entering the system at one end, and at the other, extending the reach of those pathways out into community settings. So it's going to give us the opportunity to build on our current 999-111 services, but it's going to need a flexible, highly trained and motivated workforce if we're going to respond to those challenges well. To handle all that, I think what we want to be assured in the future are that the executive are able to manage the workforce and welfare triangle, if you can imagine it. The three big people domains, workforce planning and recruitment at the top, of education and training and development in the one corner, and the whole issue of management relationships and management culture in the other. And these three have to be managed, I think, in an integrated way. You get one wrong, and we just won't be able to satisfy the requirements of our workforce. If you look at workforce planning and recruitment, I think we've just about, as we've been hearing about the number of hours we're able to put out there and our ability to meet performance targets, we've just about been coping to date. But we need to be assured that the Trust really understands the nature and the scale of the workforce required to hit our performance targets on current services, and also to be able to think about the kind of workforce models that are going to meet these changes and extensions to our services. It's reassuring to learn that we're seeing the development of a quite sophisticated staff flow model, which I think is going to go a long way to achieving that. We're also going to want to be assured that we're actively pursuing our values related to diversity, and that we're really going to have to make more effort to make sure that we include people from BAME communities as well for a better gender balance, and as well as providing opportunities for people from a more challenged communities, particularly perhaps those coastal communities where we know the level of deprivation is high. Going to another area of the triangle, education, training and development, you've heard about some of the short-term issues and seeking assurance about putting those mistakes right in clinical education is already firmly on the WWC agenda. But I don't think just putting the things right is enough. We will be looking for assurance that surprises like this don't happen again, and that the executive are able to provide early warning of such disruptive events to the WWC and through it to the board. But I'd suggest that even that is not enough. We're already talking as a committee about asking the executive to show that the whole of the education, training and development business, clinical and non-clinical, leadership and management development, is organised and managed in an integrated and cost-effective way, with clearer executive responsibilities and accountabilities for performance. With regard to improving management culture, CCAM has dallied with this for years, and it's become a bit of a cliche in conversations, but I'd like to say that there are changes already afoot. Last week, the WWC held a special meeting to discuss the first draft of an integrated management and leadership development strategy. And so it looks as if for the first time, issues of management and poor staff relationships might be systematically and properly addressed, both across the trust in general and more particularly where there are hotspots of poor management and staff relations within the trust. That strategy has now gone back to the executive and is going to come back to the WWC at the next meeting. So that's a bit about the what of the WWC in the future. But I'd like to finish to talking a bit about the how we'd like to conduct ourselves. And here I'm following really trends that were initiated by Terry. We'd like to make a real effort to hear the voices of the people from within the organisation and perhaps be a bit less reliant on the voices of directors and senior managers. We'd also like to think about how we engage with people throughout the organisation to provide intelligence about their issues and concerns. To that end, we're asking for a review of the whole staff engagement process, and we're also considering ways that the WWC, COVID permitting, can renew its leadership visits to the operating units and to in the field and to the functions of the trust. They provide very powerful, soft intelligence about what's going on out there. And then finally, I'd like to welcome governors raising issues and concerns and their ideas for improvement with me directly as WWC chair. So that's the part I have. What I'd like to do is just turn over to Terry, if I can, just for your comments, Terry, and perhaps to talk about some of the issues that preceded my taking over the chair. Terry.
Thanks, Laurie. This will probably be very brief. I think that was a very thorough account. If colleagues sort of roll forward a couple of pages in the papers for this meeting, you'll see an account of the areas that we cover at WWC. That's the forward agenda of the committee, but actually if you were to look backwards, you'd see broadly the same things. So in the period that's led up to my handing the chair over to Laurie, the prime focus was just sorting out the systems and structures within HR that cause so much frustration with our staff colleagues on a day-to-day basis. We think it's not an unreasonable expectation that people's pay should be accurate and timely, for example. And that seems to be taking forever to resolve, and it's still being a focus. It's still a focus for Ali. We think that we should be adequately staffed, and Laurie's mentioned about the issues we have around the training development function. Some significant changes were made to its management in the expectation that will bring about improvements. There is no doubt that there have been some improvements, but I think we would all agree we have some way to go until we are confident that we have a training development function that we need as a modern 21st century health organisation to give us the flow of staff that we will need to meet our external commitments. So Laurie's picked it up, I think, at quite a challenging time. We've lost 4 months of meeting with people face to face because of COVID. And as Laurie said, that's always been a key way of gaining information, particularly soft information. Going forward, we need to look at how we do that. For me, though, the thing that we need to get right going forward, and Philip has alluded to this as well as Laurie, is there can be no surprises in this area. That actually we need constant assurance, I think, now as a workforce committee, and you will need that, I think, as governors, that we have a very good grip on what is going on in terms of staff training, staff progression, and all of those other areas that support the well-being, not just the mental well-being, but just the well-being of staff, so that they know they're working for an employer who doesn't just say we care for them, but we demonstrate it through all the system structures we place around them. So that will be the work going forward. I'm hoping that an awful lot of that will actually be completed in this coming year, and then we can start focusing on some of the more perhaps esoteric areas of how we perform as an organisation. But we absolutely need to get the basics right, and I think we are all very frustrated at just how long it's still taking us to clear the decks of some of the problems that we identified perhaps 18 months ago. So thanks, Laurie, thanks, David. I think that's probably all I need to say.
Thank you both. Yeah, very, very comprehensive report. Colleagues, questions, please? I think we have a hand for Marianne, I think. Then, yeah, my screen is lighting up. I've got 4 questions here. First of all, Marianne.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I'm a public governor for Lower East and Brighton. I have previously asked for assurance about the progress with the clinical education review, and certainly from both of your presentations, I know you're very mindful that some of the progress may not have been as quick as you would have hoped. But seeing the latest report, it's alluding to good progress, but mentions that the future quals report will suggest only limited assurance. And we also heard from Philip that unfortunately we've regressed because we have a backlog of exam results again. And this is obviously concerning to governors because it doesn't suggest that the progress in this area, which was quite a key area over the last few months, has not been as quick as we would have hoped.
I think, Marianne, if you look at the escalation report, you can see that clinical education, review of clinical education was on the agenda. And I think we were partially assured that actually the concerns raised by the future quals review were actually being addressed. But the difficulty is that our focus, I think, was too narrow. There are some much wider issues associated with that, and I think that needs to be what the WWC focuses on going forward. But in terms of making good the difficulties, about responding to it, we've seen a very good response. So we were partially assured about that, but I think our focus was just too narrow, and we intend to put that right.
Thank you, Laurie. Could I ask, therefore, do you have a time scale for that? Because this does seem to have been going on for quite a considerable period of time.
Well, it's certainly on the agenda for the next formal WWC meeting. And I think given the issues around marking, we will be pushing that agenda, asking the executive to respond to that in pretty short order. I don't think it's something we can allow to continue, partly because of the effect it has on the staff involved, and partly because it has a very direct effect on our ability to meet our performance targets. We have to do something about it fast.
And if I may, Chair, to add to that, we often fall in the trap thinking what we now need is another improvement plan. We've had an improvement plan. The exec have done, I think, a very thorough review of where we are. And actually what's happened is some of the basic things that you'd perhaps anticipate to simply have been done, like marking work and feeding back that to students, was not being done in a way that we would consider to be effective. And as a consequence, 4 new staff started on Monday to support that process of assessment. So actually, we have an impression of an executive that is not sitting back going, how dreadful this is, let's spend another 6 months in buying in consultants to write a new plan. Actually, I think they probably found out about this 3 weeks ago, and within a period of 2 weeks have onboarded 4 new staff to support the teaching and learning within clinical education. That's quite a significant achievement. So what we probably slipped up on as an organisation is we had an eye on the big stuff, that we knew the policies were being rewritten. We knew that the teaching and learning processes, which had to be changed from classroom-based to online learning, were all rewritten. So all of that was done and done in a timely manner. Of course, what that also did was took people away from doing some of the basics. And so there may be an issue that we'll look at, and I know there's an external review underway, of actually, do we have sufficient staff in that area to run it in the way that we would want? And did we have enough staff in that area when we had to cope with the COVID on the one hand and all the implications that had for moving learning online and actually maintaining all the basics, which is code for getting stuff marked and getting it back to students. So the twin tracking probably meant that we didn't have enough resources. But whilst I think we're all very, very unhappy about how our students have been left in this position, I think we mustn't lose sight of the much good work that was also done to transfer what was effectively a classroom-based organisation to an online organisation in just a matter of weeks. So whilst on the one hand, I think we're right to be a little frustrated, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that there was still a great deal of good work done by that team in that timescale.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Move on now, Waz.
Yeah, thank you. My question's for Laurie. You're right, there has been some massive improvements in culture between staff and management over the past few years, and that is really, really great to hear. It's nice to hear that you've got a plan going forward, or the WWC has a plan going forward for areas where there's still difficulties. Do you have any plans to bring this to staff side, for example, through the Staff Engagement Advisory Group?
Yes, I didn't want to give a wrong impression. We're quite an early stage. The management development strategy stuff is at an early stage, and it just won't work unless what the HR and operational managers do is take it onto the staff side. It has to be done hand in hand. So you'll see once the strategy is sort of there in draft, we'll be taking it out to people to make sure that it fits both sides. In terms of the culture, it's fairly obvious. You can't directly, work on the culture per se. It's actually about the management and leadership behaviour underneath that. And that's why I'm saying I think that the development of this strategy, which is really coherent, I think, is going to address the cultural issue full on. In terms of hotspots, I think it's going to be quite important to look at the data about where there are grievances, where there is high levels of turnover, perhaps high levels of absenteeism too, and the soft intelligence that we garner from the staff to actually identify where some of those hotspots might be, so that the OD energy can be focused actually on those hotspots. I think perhaps we've been taking a sort of too trust-wide an approach to this.
OD means organisational development.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Okay, sorry. Was that okay? You got your?
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. We look forward to keeping an eye on this one. That's very promising. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's important. It's a key issue. Absolutely. Thank you, Malcolm.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I would like to ask some further questions regarding clinical education, or the broader strategy of educating staff within the trust. I would first like to just sort of get on record so I'm sort of speaking on behalf of my colleagues who are facing real difficulties in this area, and the difficulties include things such as poor communication, lack of support for our newly qualified paramedics, lack of or no funding for CPD courses, marking backlog, which has been mentioned, cancelled courses, which has been mentioned, and groups of staff feeling trapped, which has been mentioned because external applicants are being given priority over internal applicants. The second point is that I'd like to raise is that I already raised all of these points back in December at our Council of Governors meetings, and it seemed that at that time the board was caught somewhat unaware of these issues, and I specifically inquired as to whether any triangulation had taken place of the data they received by speaking to the students and staff on the front line, so to speak, to be assured that what they are hearing is what is happening on the ground. And yet here we are again, seemingly being caught unawares by actually very similar issues going back 12, 18 months or so. And when I inquired, it seemed that to date, there had yet not been any triangulation of this data by speaking to those on the ground, the students and staff involved. I've heard a lot about how you are keen to have no further surprises and to have constant assurance. So on that basis, why has no one been speaking to the staff members, colleagues who are on the ground in order to be sure that what they're hearing at board level is the reality of what is happening on the ground?
Can I just comment, Mark? I think it's fair. I don't think it's reasonable to expect the non-executives to be going around speaking to the students to check the detail of their study experience. I think we receive assurances from the management process. Now, the Council of Governors is here to actually scrutinise and ask questions of the non-execs. I think the response I hope you're hearing today is that we are all very disappointed by the situation we find ourselves in, and I think there has been a revisit of the plans, and expectations have been made very clear for what we expect going forward. But I think there's a limit to how much we can be assured to individual members of staff. I think as we receive our assurance in certain ways, and that's what we're going back to revisit.
But it raises a cultural issue, Malcolm, doesn't it? Because if you're right, and I'm sure you are, following on from what David said, it means that that information isn't flowing up through the system and getting to the committee and to the board. And that, I guess, is a cultural issue. It's how the clinical educators relate to students. It's how students relate to the organisation. So I don't want to give the new strategy a sort of as a cure-all, but I think it would certainly help in general and in that particular circumstance of making sure we hear the voices and concerns of staff lower down the organisation.
And to put it into context, Malcolm, there's been 5 external inspections in just over a year of the learning and development function, and an external consultant brought in to review the work. So we have to balance just how much we're looking at something with how much we expect stuff to get on and happen. I don't think it's necessarily the job of non-execs to spend their time in meetings all the time with staff, but I understand how you might feel that that would have been a useful annex to the information we've got. One of the things that I think we do need to be concerned about is that I believe many of the students who submitted their portfolios, which subsequently failed assessment, believe that they would pass. So actually, you do have to ask the question about what would the value have been in talking to those students before their portfolios were submitted, because they would have gone, everything's fine. So the challenge here is getting the granularity in the information that the execs need to inform us so that we can be properly informed as we move forward. So it always seems to be, well, one solution would be let's have more meetings with staff, and I'm sure we could do that. It would be interesting to speculate on what we wouldn't do if we were doing that. But actually, one of the key issues here is there was an awful lot of stuff that was not known. And actually, I would suggest some of this wasn't known to the actual staff who were going through the learning system. Now as non-execs, I think we've been given a range of assurances from Philip and his exec colleagues about how things will change moving forward. Now we've got very clear areas that we can hold people to account for. I think we can look much more carefully at individual changes we expect to see in the system. But bluntly, I'm an ex-Ofsted inspector. I wouldn't expect at this stage in the proceedings for us to find out that work wasn't being properly marked and fed back. I think probably we should have, that should have been known within the systems and structures. That seems a bit operational for us as non-execs. What we need to know going forward is that there are proper audit processes in place so that we can be informed with some good evidence that these things are taking place. And as I said, remember, there have been 5 external inspections of this area in something like 14 months. That's a huge amount of information. So you do have to be very careful that we don't spend all our time watching and measuring. We do need to leave people some time to get on with stuff.
And David, Al Reimer has been with UWC as well and as a NED for some time. I wouldn't want Malcolm to be left with the impression that some other forms of triangulation do go on. But it's not been as easy during the pandemic, but NEDs regularly get involved in leadership walkarounds and visits to various sites where I can assure you staff are not shy at bringing forward any concerns they have. And I feel sure I can speak for other NEDs by saying that when those do occur, that we do take those up with managers and executive colleagues to see that we're tackling them. I'm very conscious of time, David, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think Malcolm, first of all, you asked for your concerns to be noted, and they certainly will be noted and have been noted, I can assure you, and because this is a matter of significant concern to the board. Secondly, what I will say is, I think, can I respectfully suggest as well, that the next council we take an agenda item on this particular matter around education and training and go into it in a little bit more detail as well, because we don't, no one wants to be let off the hook on this one, Malcolm. This is absolutely fundamental to why we're here. We need well educated staff in order to give good care to patients. It's basic, and we've got to get it right. So we're very happy to open us to a deeper discussion and scrutiny on the matter to make sure we get this fixed, because it's important.
If I can, I think Malcolm's point has really emphasised that we do need to ensure that the whole staff engagement process is right, and we need to make sure it works, because then perhaps we'd have learned about this earlier. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair comment. Okay, can I move us on to Marcia's question?
Can I just very briefly say thank you for your in-depth response. I did have another question. I'm more than happy to lower my hand and then raise it again after Marcia and Jeffrey.
Is this on this? Is this on this issue?
No, it's not. It's on a different WWC matter.
Okay, can you give somebody else a turn, Malcolm? I'll come back to you with pleasure. Marcia.
Thank you. My question is about new ways of working. So obviously with COVID, a lot of non-operational staff has been working from home. Some of them really happy, others decided to return to the office, which is absolutely fine. I've heard reports of staff that have been asked to return to the office, even though they wanted to remain working from home, and everything it seems that was working okay for them. They weren't given a clear explanation of why this happened. My question would be, is this something that you're going to focus on, like as we move forward into these new ways of working? Are you going to focus on the way the trust puts this new strategy in place?
Or you want to say that? Can you?
Just very briefly, I didn't mention it, but I was really impressed about the degree to which the trust has focused on learning from the COVID experience. And I think I've not heard of this issue before, particularly, and it will be interesting to hear from the executive side about how well structured the plan to re-engage with people and draw them back into places like Crawley actually is. I'm afraid I don't know, but I'll note the point and see if we can understand how well managed that process is. I'm sure it is, but I don't know.
Well, Marcia, can we come back to you with that? Because I know the executive are very much engaged in discussion. You know, they met in, for instance, they met in person for the first time as a team for the first time in some months, rather than by this medium, for instance. The next board meeting, I would like most of the board to be in the same room if it's physically possible within the rules. And we need to find an acceptable way that manages staff safety against the needs of the organisation. And I think we'll be going some kind of hybrid arrangement for certain departments and people. But this is going to be an evolving discussion over the next few months. So I know the executive have got this on the agenda, and we'll track that through the workforce committee, as Laurie says.
Okay.
It's a really important issue, and we want to get the benefits, because some good stuff's come out of this. As much as it's frustrating not being seen, having these meetings in person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Kempster.
All right, thank you. Laurie, it's a bit of a difficult one, this one, because I don't think you'll have an answer immediately. But I was in conversation with a paramedic yesterday who's been on light duty since April this year. He was signed off on light duty since April this year. For the last 12 weeks, he's been trying to get back into active service, so back on the vehicles, but occupational health will not sign him off, and all they're doing is giving him a telephone consultation. Now, his physiotherapist has actually signed him off as being fit for work, but occupational health are holding him back, saying, no, you can't go back to work. And it strikes me that when we're short of staff due to sickness, we have a very strange situation here.
Yeah, Jeff, I think we want Laurie comments. Going to suggest that we just assure ourselves that the member of staff has gone through his line manager and know what processes have been followed here before. And if they haven't been followed, then it's appropriate to escalate it to a board subcommittee. But I take the point. It sounds a very frustrating experience for the member of staff. And we would like that resolved. I think can we check whether it's gone to his line manager, and then can we then remit it to the executive in the first instance?
Yeah, no, I think the concern I have is that occupational health are doing telephone consultations on something which should probably be where we should be going to physical consultations now.
I think that's a contentious issue right across the NHS. If it doesn't get resolved in the way that David suggested, then do get in touch, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and that interrelationship with occupational health and the workforce is an important, very important issue, and we want to make sure that's right. Okay, Malcolm, your turn again.
Thank you very much. My question is regarding, and now I should think about it. I'm not sure if this is the right place to raise it, but it's too late, so I'm going to raise it here anyway. It's regarding the budget for the paramedic practitioner group of staff. So for colleagues who are unaware, the paramedic practitioners, alongside the critical care paramedics, are the most senior clinicians in the ambulance service in terms of the patient-facing role, on the ambulances. And over the last year, the role has expanded significantly to cover 3 broad areas of seeing patients face-to-face, providing clinical advice and support to colleagues, and providing clinical support on a more managerial basis, and teaching, education and training, those types of things. So those 3 broad areas. However, we do not have enough paramedic practitioners to do that. So essentially, we're having to compromise at all times on 2 out of those 3 activities, resulting in a piecemeal delivery of these different aspects of care. And it came to light that the budget for the paramedic practitioners had seemingly been cut significantly. I wouldn't want to quote any specific numbers, but a significant cut in the numbers of paramedic practitioners that the trust were aiming to recruit or to have as a baseline. I did send this as a question, so I hope there'll be some awareness of this issue.
I think, Malcolm, that's a managerial. I think that to me sounds like a good. I think Philip should take that away and get back to you. And I think if there's an issue regarding governance, i.e. appropriate scrutiny and following appropriate procedures, then I think it's appropriate that the non-executives, with the workforce committee particularly, ask a question. I just worry about time here. Can we just note, can we note that you're concerned about that issue? Philip's going to speak next, finally, briefly, and then we'll move on to questions from the public, because it's I'm just conscious they're not going to have their say. So, Philip, you wanted to comment?
It was really in response to Jeff's point
we can't check it out unless we know the person. Jeff, if you've got a name, can you email it to me?
Yeah, obviously clinically confident, so we can make sure that's the case. And Philip, can you take note of Malcolm's issue, please, and start a dialogue?
Yeah.
On that issue.
If I may just briefly interject, the reason I raised it here is that in response to my question, I did actually receive a response from the non-executive team saying that they would have a look at it. So that is the reason I raise it here today. So if I could have a comment, that would be most appreciated from my non-executive colleagues.
Let me ask to forgive me if they are aware of it. Are any of you responded to that? Are any of you aware of that issue, my non-executive colleagues? Do you remember which non-executive it was, Malcolm?
Well, I can check my emails, but perhaps if there's no recollection, then and we're short for time, then maybe it's not going to be a suitable time to talk about it.
We'll pick it up, Malcolm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now, I really do feel under pressure to give the public their say. Frank, is your question a short one?
Sorry, relatively on the same issue. It's, are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you. Right. Is it a question, not a statement? If you have a question,
I have a question in 3 parts. It's relating to item 14.3 of the last minutes, which the public weren't able to attend. I challenged the way the revised governor's positions or areas were done and asked for, and it's stated in the minutes, 14.3, that it was discussed at governor's meeting, board meetings and nominations meetings. And I cannot find, being a trained auditor of mine, anywhere in their minutes where this is documented. Further, I have not had no answer to why, if the way that decision was made is correct, if the Constitution items 13.2 and 44.3 are going to be amended to follow that process. And bear in mind that the Constitution is the principal document of the organisation. And I believe if we're not carrying out correct procedures at board and governor level, this puts a pure example.
Can I just cut across you? We have addressed this, and you've spoken to Peter Lee, who's the company secretary, and was spoken to you. And I don't think we can do any more today on this.
I also smell a rat, David, with respect, because I tried to write to my governors on this issue, but now it all has to go through the governance office, and they've never received it. Now, this cannot be right constitutionally or diplomatically. It's obviously wrong. So why can't we have the governor's direct access email addresses back like we've traditionally had? If you want members to cooperate and be active and use their knowledge to improve the organisation, we've got to make sure that they have
send all the emails we receive get forwarded on to the governors. I can assure you, the governor's office do not edit anything when it's relation to communications to the governors. We'll get back to you outside of the meeting because we have raised this has been discussed in other fora and appropriately signed off. I've got other questions which I will have to say we need to move on now. I'm afraid that we've gone over time. And this is a public meeting, and I would like to give our membership an opportunity before we do any other business of asking any questions. And Casey, are you able to orchestrate?
Yeah, sure. There's a question from a member of the Trust who's based in Kent, Margaret Parker. Her question is, the government have stated their intention to reform the way patients will access accident and emergency and urgent care in the future, for example, by phoning ahead via 111 and booking a slot. Have CCAM been involved in any discussions about these changes, and has consideration been given to whether it will result in more patients requesting an ambulance for their need for urgent care?
Fair question. I think the Chief Executive did mention this in his presentation. Philip, do you want to give a very brief response to that?
So thank you, David. Thank you for the question. Yes, it's a live consideration of the service. And so the service is being designed at the moment and tested, and wherever we're very live to that risk, and so things are being implemented in a way in which should write down the risk of that happening. But it's too early to say what the actual solution is.
Okay, but thank you for the question. Any other questions from our public? Okay, we need to thank you. We've had a record attendance, I think, Katie. We've got, how many people we got online today?
Yeah, it peaked at about 93, which is amazing.
Blimey.
Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate your attention.
Absolutely. That's a better attendance than we were actually in a room somewhere in one of our counties.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Super.
Any other questions at all, do you think, Katie?
I don't think there's any other questions. Just a quick, any other business and then close?
Yeah. So, colleagues, any other urgent business from Governor, colleagues?
Brian, David. Brian Chester.
Brian, is that a question or any of the AOB?
It's not a question. I just, Chair, I cannot let Frank's come and go without saying that as a governor, I was well aware of what has actually his challenge, and I'm also, as chair of MDC, I'm very content that actually we went through the appropriate regulations and procedure in terms of what we did. That's
okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. We'll close that conversation down. That's appreciated. Thank you. Any other business from the governors? Thank you. Now, the areas to highlight to the non-executives, I think, Isabel, you'd have been keeping a copious list, I'm sure, but I think the key areas which I'm sure we've all noted is, which hopefully we've got across is important, but education and training is clearly a very important matter. Performance monitoring, particularly quality of our performance, making sure that we're giving the best we can service to the public, particularly where long waits are involved. Any other items, Isabel, that I need to summarise?
I think those are the main two, but obviously the NEDs will receive the minutes, and I'll highlight anything else that comes out.
Okay, thank you indeed. Review of meeting effectiveness. Otherwise, I've had a great start with finishing some 9 minutes over time, but I think it's important that people have their say. Are there any other issues? Are you happy given the limitations of this medium? Are you content that this has been an appropriate meeting to air the issues we need to? If you please, particularly our public out there, if there are any issues of you feel where we can improve, we gratefully receive them. So can I say thank you? I look forward to the same enthusiastic attendance as our annual members meeting later on today, which has been well advertised on the Trust website and in other public media, and we look forward to welcoming our membership and the wider public to that meeting later this afternoon. So on that, we'll move on to our private meeting.